My idea of a talk or an address or a sermon at a service of public worship is to deal in practical matters. I think the purpose of it is to help the people that are out in front. Now, I don't regard myself as any oracle or any wonder worker, but I have a great belief in the fact that the practical application of Christianity to an individual's life will help him or her to live more happily, more courageously, more successfully. And once or more every year, I've made it a policy to speak on the subject of how to have more self-confidence. Now, I look over this congregation and you all look like you're very confident, like nothing in the world bothered you. But anybody who's had any experience with human beings knows that it is the habit of a sophisticated person to dissemble, that is, not to reveal on that outward facade known as the countenance, the inner problems. And while you may look to be very self-assertive and self-composed, I imagine that a good many of you are like me. You have to struggle with the matter of self-confidence. Now, one night I made a speech in a West Virginia city to a convention of businessmen in the city auditorium. After I got through with my speech, I was shaking hands with such persons as came forward to greet me. When a man came along, I judged him to be about maybe 40 years of age. And he had a peculiar intensity of manner, almost an attitude of desperation. And he said, "Can I speak to you privately after this meeting? Everybody's gone." And I was impressed by his obvious distress. And I said, "All right, hang around. I'll be glad to talk to you." And after everybody had gone, we sat down on some piles of lumber, which were backstage, there being no proper chairs available. And he said, "I'm in this town tomorrow in connection with the biggest business deal I've ever had. If I succeed, I'll go on up the ladder. If I fail, I'm through." And he said, "I read in the paper about this meeting tonight. I don't belong to this convention, but I came down here to hear you talk on positive thinking." Now, he said, positive thinking is exactly what I haven't got. And said he, "Why is it, tell me," he says, "why is it that all my life long, and I'm 40 years old, have I had to be plagued with an inferiority complex, with constant self-doubt, with feelings of inadequacy? Now, I just know I cannot put this deal over tomorrow. I'm sure of it. And I am so distressed I don't know what to do. Please help me." Well, I said in the first place, relax. If you put it over tomorrow, that's great. If you don't, then there's always another day. And I said, for you to sit here and tell me categorically that you know you can't put it over is to, in effect, affirm your inability, and you are bound to fail. But he said, "I've always had an inferiority complex." I said, "I know. I'm no psychiatrist, and even if I were, I couldn't give you a treatment in the few minutes that we have at our disposal. You need scientific counseling to find out what are the sources of your lack of faith in yourself. That'll have to come later. But I said I will give you something, which if you will use it, will pull you through this present situation. And if after you have scientific counseling, you still continue to use it, you'll find that this will be the basic factor in the cure of your personality. I said, what I want you to do, when you walk down the street tonight, all the way down to your hotel, you say the following 10 words, 10 magic, creative words. And the words are these: I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And then I said, when you get into bed, before you go to sleep, you say that 3 times again, and then add to that another word, He giveth His beloved sleep, and then you go off to sleep. And when you wake up in the morning, before you arise from your bed, you say that 3 times. And then when you enter the office of the people you have to talk to about this big deal, you say again, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And then turn the whole deal over to Him and let Him handle it. He said, I never heard those words before. I said, that shows you haven't been to church very much. So I wrote them out for him. He got up finally. He said, well, all right. Okay, he says, I'll do it. And he squared his shoulders and walked out into the night. And as I watched him go, he seemed a pathetic figure. And yet it seemed to me that already a new power of faith was beginning to operate in his life. He told me later that it was a wonder that a few words from the Bible could have such an effect. It's no wonder. It's a practical, scientific demonstration of the power of faith working against the power of negativism. And he went down to that crisis, not by himself, but with God. Now, I don't know how you feel about self-confidence, whether you've got it or whether you haven't. But I would like to say to you, and I say it without fear or favor, I say it with a full conviction, you can live with self-confidence. I know you can. And it can be on the basis of that text that I gave you. This is one of the greatest things in the Bible, one of the greatest things in all literature, one of the greatest demonstrations of power ever put together by the mind of man working with the mind of God. I can do all things through Jesus Christ who gives me the strength. Now, when you come right down to it, the thing that pulls people out of depression and despondency and negativism and inadequacy and inferiority is the power of God. Now, we live in a generation of power. You see demonstrations of power everywhere. Man has manipulated the resources of the universe so that he can handle power. But there's never been a power, and I doubt if there ever will be, a power equal to the power of God when it really gets to operating in human beings. Now, I have here in my hand a letter written to me by a young man in this congregation. He may even be here. He gave me permission to use this illustration because he says this might help somebody else. Here's a young man riddled with self-doubt, confusion, and accordingly depression, and the power of God gets to work in him. Now just watch what happens. Approximately 8 years ago today, at 17 years of age, I was desperately struggling from a miserable depression, unable to express my feelings and growing more and more withdrawn each day. when I happened to stumble onto your book, A Guide to Confident Living. Now, I feel embarrassed about this book business, but in order to carry the story, you can't be super modest. Anyway, if I can sell a few books, well, so what? Anyway, he said, I stumbled onto your book, A Guide to Confident Living, on my father's dresser in his bedroom. I opened the book and turned to the forwarding pages where you said, no matter what situation you are in, your life can be a great success. You do not need to be defeated by anything. Dr. Peale, those words were a great comfort to me then and gave me the greatest uplifting feeling I'd had in months. I read on feverishly through the chapter, How to Rid Yourself of the Inferiority Complex and How to Break the Worry Habit, and took note of your suggestion of how professional psychological counseling could be of great help. I spent the rest of the evening reading your book cover to cover. It was a few days later, I was sitting in my afternoon classes in high school, and once again that creepy feeling of depression and inadequacy overtook me, and I began to feel more and more withdrawn. I stood up, walked out of the classroom, got to my car, drove home, and trudged into my living room. Almost speechless, I sat gloomily, feeling no hope for my life, when my mother came down the stairs and spotted me lying wearily on the couch. I could hold my tears no longer, and I burst out crying into my mother's arms. Up until that time, I had confided to no one in my life, not even my brother, about how life had suddenly turned in on me. I felt no one would understand me and that I was going insane. My mother asked me what was wrong, and I told her as I cried uncontrollably that a few months back I'd taken the drug LSD for the experience, and since then had felt that I was losing control of my mind and my emotions. I'd grown so scared thinking about it that when I told my mother, she held me close to her side and told me that everything would be all right, that with God's help it would be all right. What a mother. Okay? Well, Dr. Peale, to make this long story short, I spent the next few months seeing a psychologist who helped me to understand the way I was feeling, the reasons for my depressions and inadequacy, and offered me suggestions on how to recover. It was the combination of the spiritual faith revived in me by your book and the mental health brought to me by the drug clinic which helped me on my way out of that deep, hopeless depression and into a much healthier and happier state of mind, into self-confidence. At 25, today, I have a magna cum laude degree from Utica College of Syracuse University, 2 very rewarding years of sales experience with the Dale Carnegie Institute of New York City, and a fine position with Western International Hotels in New York City. I'm also attending Marble Collegiate Church and consider myself so fortunate to be close to your church. You see? We've got thousands and thousands of young people all over this country who are searching, looking for something, down dead ends, can't find it. And they follow all kinds of crazy things in order to find it. Cults and what have you. Where, if anybody has any scientific understanding of human life at all, they know that there's one great physician who has the power to heal the lesions of the human mind and bring back normalcy and cleanness and straightforwardness and control. That's why we preach the gospel here on this corner day after Sunday, week after week, year after year. It's because right here, here's a big modern generation out. This book lay up here when it wasn't the modern generation, and they preached out of it to the people of those generations, and they gave them the truth, and they helped them to live, and to live successfully. And then things change. Old buildings pass away. Enormous skyscrapers climb to the sky. Airplanes surge across this city. All modernity, but nothing has ever got ahead of this book here, in which is the truth about how to live a life of control and power. I can do all things through Jesus Christ, who gives you the strength. Well, that's one thing. The second thing is you got to get to know yourself. Nobody ever gets anywhere with himself until he gets to know himself. And when you know yourself, then your problems seem to fade away. I had a lot of trouble with this self-confidence thing myself, if I may be permitted to speak personally. Oh, I shouldn't do that, I suppose. But since I got into it, I might as well go ahead with it. When I was a small boy, I had an awful inferiority complex. I can remember it yet. They had a pernicious custom in those days. When guests came to the house, they'd bring in the children, and the children would do what they called speak a piece. You know, some poem they'd learned, so that the parents could show the children off to the guests. This is one of the most horrible things. They should have thought of it in the Inquisition. And I remember how scared I was. And when anybody came to the house, I'd make myself scarce. I couldn't get up before anybody to save me. My blood ran cold. I was stultified. And this went on for quite a while. And one time in college, a professor kept me after class, and he said, "Norman, what's wrong with you?" He said, "You know this stuff, but when it comes to giving it back in class, you freeze. You can't do it." He says, "You don't amount to anything. You're just a fraidy cat." And he said, "I haven't got much use for you, the way you act." And I walked out of the room, and I was very angry. I was going to clean this guy up. And then I was going to retire from the university. But when I realized he was 6'4" and weighed about 75 pounds more than I did, I figured it wasn't a good idea. But I used to go around telling myself that I didn't amount to anything, that I was a worm, that I had no brains, that I had no ability. This is all for sure. And you know, I began to realize after a while that people were agreeing with me. And people will always accept you at your own self-evaluation. They always will. Well, one day, I walked out of the college, down to the 4th step from the bottom, I well remember it. And I stopped there, and I talked to Jesus. And I said, "Look, Jesus, I don't want to be this way anymore. I don't want to go through life, crawling through life on my hands and knees. I want to be a man and stand up and be able to meet life and do something, and I can't do it unless you help me." That's what I said to him, right there on the 4th step, and I can take you to the place, the exact spot. And I felt him come to me and to say to me, "You stay with me, and I will stay with you." And he helped me. Now, you never quite get over it. Every time I walk up that steps, this old feeling is waiting for me. But you see, after a while, you get so you can say to it, "Go on back down, I can handle this situation." And even you don't do it very well, why, you still have a sense of mastery about it. Now, you've got to learn to be a wholesome, changed person, and learn to have respect for yourself, that you can do it with God's help. Now, a week or two ago, my wife and I were in India, and we were in New Delhi, and we were talking to people about somebody to be a publisher for our magazine Guidepost in India. Guidepost has now come to have 3,500,000 subscribers in this country, and it's the 15th magazine in the United States. The first time a religious magazine ever attained this penetration of the market, and we want it to go into the world market. So we have one in Korea, have one in Britain, and we're working on India. India has 675 million people, and 10% of them are Christians, which is quite a large number of people. And about half the people in India read English, so we might publish a magazine in India, and in English, and one in Hindi. That's the idea. Well, we had this man. He was sitting there, and he was telling me that he could handle it. He said, you give me the job, I'll publish a magazine in India that will be very successful. I know how to do it. I said, you sound to me like you have a lot of self-confidence. Or is it bravado or egotism? Tell me, my friend, what is it? He says, it is normal Christian self-confidence. So I wrote down what he said. He said, I have had some experience in publishing, and therefore I feel I am somewhat knowledgeable. Second, I would like to learn more. I am teachable. I don't know it all. Third, I believe in the objectives of Guidepost magazine. 4, I like to work hard. 5, I'm always faithful to my employers. 6, I will do my best. 7, I will at all times gladly take direction from my superiors. 8, I always look to God for guidance. 9, I believe there's a great market for Guidepost in India. 10, I do not believe in failure, only in successful operation. I have sound confidence because I have sound faith. And I said to him, have you always been this urbane? Have you always been this self-controlled? He said, not till I found Jesus. But when I found him, he reorganized me. He gave me new power over myself. I am about to recommend to the executives of Guidepost that they hire this fellow and give him a chance to build this magazine in India. You see, the point of the matter is to be what they call healthy-minded. Healthy-minded, in which you are not the victim of quirks of any kind, fears, anxieties, self-doubt, inadequacy. It's to establish yourself as an individual whereby you go out in the morning feeling that with God's help you can handle the problems you'll have to face. Like a young man who spoke to me the other day. He told me, he said, I've been promoted into a very good position in the same company, but he said, I was comfortable in the old one. I'm afraid of this one. He said, I don't really believe I can handle it. I said, how did you handle the previous position? He said, well, I did it so well, they promoted me to the position above it. Well, then I told him about Charlie Brown, who's just become chairman of the biggest corporation in this country, AT&T, succeeding the legendary John Butts. Charles Brown has had 23 positions in 30 years in AT&T. And he said the way he maintained confidence was to do each position so well that they had to push him up into the position above it. And I said to the boy, your employers apparently think more of you than you do. But I said, if you will take every day with the Lord Jesus Christ at your side, He'll give you a healthy-minded confidence in yourself, and you'll have the time of your life as you go up the ladder from position to position. Now, what I want to say to you is, you can do anything you're minded to do in this life if you have the respect for yourself, which comes from a knowledge of the good God who made you as great as you are. That's the secret of self-confidence.